Friday, 6 o'clock in the evening. The office was a complete ghost town, every desk empty and every computer screen dark. Everyone had already left for the weekend, eager to start their 2 days of freedom and escape the fluorescent lights. I sat completely alone in the war room, surrounded by empty pizza boxes that had piled up over the past week and mountains of unformatted data scattered across 3 different tables. The Apex proposal, the project that could define all our careers and determine who got promoted to director, was due Monday morning at exactly 8 o'clock sharp. We had less than 60 hours to finish something that should have taken weeks. Dorian and Sabine were supposed to stay with me tonight. They'd promised this morning in front of everyone. They'd sworn we'd work through the night together and finish this massive project as a team, just like we always did. My phone buzzed loudly on the cluttered table. A text from Dorian appeared. "Hey Rome, family emergency just came up. Sabine is helping me handle it. You're a rock star, just polish the intro and we'll present together Monday morning. You got this. We believe in you." I stared at the message for a long moment, reading it 3 times. Something felt terribly wrong about this. I opened Instagram on my phone, checking the private account they didn't know I'd been following for months. My stomach dropped like an elevator with cut cables. Dorian had posted a story exactly 5 minutes ago. He and Sabine were clinking bright margarita glasses at a downtown rooftop bar, both laughing and clearly celebrating something. The caption read in bold letters, "Weekend vibes, sucker-free." The sucker was me. I'd been the sucker for 3 years. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I simply deleted our group chat without reading the old messages. I opened a fresh document on my laptop and started working alone. My name is Romilly. For 3 long years, I'd been the invisible ink that wrote their success stories while they took all the credit and praise. I was the detail person, the quiet one who never complained, the backbone of our entire department who kept everything running smoothly. While others took credit for my work and collected quarterly bonuses, I stayed late every night and made sure everything actually worked correctly. The dynamic in our team was simple and brutal, refined over years of practice. Dorian was the face of everything we did. He spoke well in meetings, dressed in expensive tailored suits that probably cost more than my monthly rent, and charmed every single boss who crossed his path with his confident smile. Sabine was his enforcer, his fiercely loyal sidekick who aggressively blocked anyone from getting too close to his carefully protected spotlight. And me? I was the workhorse nobody noticed. I did all the research, built every single financial model from scratch, and wrote every script for our presentations word by word. In team meetings, Dorian would confidently say, "We found that revenue increased by 15%, while pointing at complex slides I'd created at 2 in the morning after everyone else had gone home. He got the quarterly bonus and the recognition. I got a quick good job, team, email from management that didn't even mention my name. I'd watched this exact pattern repeat itself dozens and dozens of times over 3 years. I told myself constantly that it would eventually change. That hard work would finally be noticed by someone important. That eventually, someone would see through Dorian's manufactured charm and recognize who was actually doing all the real work. I'd been completely wrong about everything. 2 weeks ago, everything in our department had suddenly changed. Merritt, our boss and department head, had called the entire team into his office for an emergency meeting. He looked more serious than I'd ever seen him, which definitely meant this was critically important to the company. "This is it," he'd said dramatically, spreading papers and folders across his massive desk. "The Eldrick account. It's worth exactly $20 million to this company over 3 years. If we land this contract, whoever leads the project successfully gets promoted directly to director." Merritt had looked directly and only at Dorian when he said those final words. The promotion was already decided in his mind. "Dorian, you lead this entire project. Sabine, you support him in everything. Romilly, you handle all the data analysis and background research like always." Dorian had smirked with absolute confidence, already imagining his corner office. "Don't worry at all, Merritt. I've got the complete vision for this account. Romilly will just crunch the numbers and do the boring stuff like she always does." I'd tried desperately to speak up, to suggest a strategic approach I'd been thinking about for days. Dorian had cut me off immediately without even looking at me. "Let's not get bogged down in tiny details yet, Rome. We need to think big picture first. Strategy before tactics." Merritt had nodded in complete agreement. They always agreed with whatever Dorian said. He had that magical effect on people, especially bosses. They desperately wanted to believe in him, wanted to be part of whatever success he confidently promised. I'd left that meeting knowing exactly how this would go. I'd do 90% of the work. Dorian would take 100% of the credit, and I'd get absolutely nothing except more late nights. The 2 weeks leading up to the deadline had been a complete nightmare that got worse every single day. Dorian scheduled daily, brainstorming sessions that were actually just him talking endlessly about how he'd decorate the director's office after his inevitable promotion. He talked enthusiastically about the bigger mahogany desk he'd order, the incredible window view he'd demand, the generous expense account he'd use for client dinners. Sabine spent entire afternoons shopping online at her desk without even pretending to work. I could see the shopping cart notifications constantly popping up on her second monitor. Designer bags, ridiculously expensive shoes, celebration outfits for when Dorian got promoted and took her with him to better projects. Every single time I asked politely for their sections of the proposal, they stalled with transparent excuses. "I'm still iterating on my ideas," Dorian would say vaguely, waving his hand dismissively. "Don't want to share it before it's absolutely perfect. You understand." By Thursday afternoon, I'd checked our shared Drive folder multiple times. It was completely empty except for my research folder that contained hundreds of hours of work. 0 contributions from either of them. Not a single slide, not one word of text. I'd known then, with absolute certainty, that they had no intention whatsoever of doing any actual work. They were going to coast entirely on my effort. Just like they'd done on every single project for 3 years. But this time felt different somehow. This time, the stakes were too high for me to just accept it quietly like I always had before. Friday morning at exactly 10 o'clock, I'd finally cornered both of them in the small conference room. I'd closed the door and been direct and firm in my tone. "We have absolutely nothing prepared. The client explicitly wants a full operational overhaul strategy with detailed implementation timelines, and we have nothing but empty slides and vague ideas." Dorian had waved me off dismissively like I was being dramatic and annoying. "Relax, Rome. Seriously, you worry too much. We'll blitz it tonight. Order some pizza with extra cheese. We'll stay until it's completely done and perfect, all 3 of us working together." He'd looked me directly in the eye with his most sincere expression and promised, "We're a team. We do this together. Always have, always will." It was a complete lie. I could see it clearly in the way he glanced quickly at Sabine. I could see it in the weekend bag already packed and waiting under his desk that morning. Sabine had nodded enthusiastically, playing her supporting role perfectly. "Absolutely. We're totally in this together. We'll make it work somehow. We always do." They'd both smiled at me with completely fake sincerity that didn't reach their eyes. I'd wanted desperately to believe them. Part of me needed to believe that maybe, just this once, they'd actually show up and do their share. But I'd also noticed something crucial. Dorian had fresh cologne on, the expensive kind he only wore going out. Sabine had changed into going-out clothes during lunch. They'd carefully planned their entire escape before I'd even walked into that conference room. I'd nodded and gone back to my desk, already knowing with absolute certainty I'd be working completely alone all weekend. Friday night, 8 o'clock exactly. The reality of my situation set in like cold water being poured over my head. If I turned in nothing on Monday, the entire team would fail spectacularly. But I knew exactly what would happen next. Merritt would blame me specifically for not supporting the lead adequately. I'd get fired while Dorian made convincing excuses about my incompetence. If I did all the work myself and put their names on it like usual, Dorian would definitely get the promotion he didn't deserve. He'd become my direct boss. 3 more years of complete invisibility stretched out in front of me like a prison sentence with no possibility of parole. I made a choice right then that would change everything. I opened the master file on my laptop. I carefully highlighted every single slide that had been assigned to Dorian and Sabine in our initial planning document from 2 weeks ago. Their sections on market expansion, their parts about brand visibility and social media, their entire flashy approach that had no substance. I hit delete and watched them disappear. I wasn't just going to finish their abandoned work. I was going to change everything completely. I was going to build something entirely different, something only I fully understood, something they couldn't possibly present without me. This wasn't about revenge or getting even. This was about survival. This was about finally making them face real consequences for their laziness and manipulation. I cracked my knuckles, made a fresh pot of coffee, and started typing faster than I ever had. Dorian's strategy, the little bit he'd actually bothered to share in brief emails to Merritt, was focused entirely on expansion and aggressive marketing campaigns. It was flashy, expensive, and incredibly shallow when you looked closely. It sounded impressive in meetings, but had absolutely no real substance or data behind it. I knew the client intimately, though. I'd done extensive research on Eldrick, the CEO we were pitching to next week. He was conservative, practical, and incredibly detail-oriented in everything he did. He'd built his company through careful cost management and efficiency, not flashy campaigns and empty promises. He hated waste. He loved efficiency and measurable results he could track. I spent the entire weekend completely rewriting the proposal from scratch. I built a comprehensive, cost reduction and automation model that was the exact opposite of Dorian's approach. It contradicted absolutely everything Dorian had been confidently saying in his email updates to Merritt. I created detailed spreadsheets showing exactly where Eldrick's company was losing money unnecessarily. I identified inefficiencies in their supply chain that were costing them millions. I designed an automation system that would save them $8 million annually within 2 years. Every single slide was backed up with hard data from multiple sources. Every claim had 3 independent sources cited. Every recommendation had a clear implementation timeline with specific milestones. I built a fortress of logic that only I could explain or defend properly. It was brilliant, it was thorough, and it was entirely mine. Sunday at 3 a.m, I was genuinely hallucinating from too much caffeine and nowhere near enough sleep. My eyes burned painfully. My hands shook uncontrollably as I typed. But I finally finished the last slide of the 60-page deck. Now came the formatting and final touches, the details that would make or break the entire presentation. On the title slide under Presented By, I usually listed the team hierarchy: Dorian lead, Sabine support, Romilly research. That was the standard format we'd used without question for 3 solid years. I stared at that line for a very long time. My finger hovered over the keyboard. My heart was racing. Then I typed something different. Strategic audit, prepared solely by Romilly. I saved the file as Final Submission V1 on my personal encrypted flash drive that I kept in my bag. Then I created a deliberately corrupted dummy file and uploaded it to our shared drive. If they tried to open it over the weekend to check my progress, they'd just see an error message about file corruption. I closed my laptop. I went home. I slept for exactly 4 hours. When I woke up Monday morning, I felt completely calm and clear-headed. Whatever happened next, I'd finally told the truth. I'd finally put my name on my own work. Monday morning, 7:45. The conference room was set up and ready, exactly as I'd arranged it. I'd arrived early to connect my laptop to the projector and test every single technical element. Dorian and Sabine strolled in casually 15 minutes before the meeting started. They both looked absolutely terrible, clearly hungover, but trying desperately to hide it with excessive coffee and breath mints they kept popping. Dorian slapped me hard on the back, making me stumble forward a step. "You look completely exhausted, killer." "Did you actually get it done this weekend?" I nodded slowly, staring at my laptop screen. It's ready. Everything's complete. Dorian leaned in close and whispered directly in my ear. Great. Here's the plan. I'll do the introduction and the closing remarks. Sabine takes the financial projections section in the middle. You do the boring technical stuff, just like always, right? He didn't even ask to see the slides. He didn't ask what I'd changed or what approach I'd taken. He was that arrogant, that absolutely confident that everything would work out perfectly in his favor. Sabine was touching up her makeup carefully in a compact mirror. Did you remember to put our names first on the title slide? Rom, Dorian's name has to be biggest since he's the lead. I smiled. Everything's exactly as it should be. Eldrick walked into the conference room at exactly 8 o'clock, with 3 members of his senior executive team following behind. He looked grumpy and impatient, like someone who didn't appreciate having his valuable time wasted on mediocre presentations. Merritt was already sweating nervously, dabbing his shiny forehead with a handkerchief. This account meant absolutely everything to our department's annual budget. Dorian, Eldrick barked sharply, not bothering with pleasantries or small talk. You promised me a vision last week. You said this presentation would be worth my time. Impress me quickly. Dorian stood up confidently, buttoning his expensive suit jacket with a flourish. Absolutely, Eldrick. We've worked all weekend to bring you something bold and innovative. A comprehensive marketing expansion strategy that will revolutionize. I connected my laptop to the projector. The first slide appeared on the large screen. Giant bold letters filled the entire display. Cost reduction and operational risk analysis. I watched Dorian's face carefully in my peripheral vision. His confident smile froze completely. His hand stopped mid-gesture, suspended in air. The silence in the room was absolutely beautiful. Dorian froze completely like a statue. He stared at the screen like it had personally betrayed him. This wasn't the marketing pitch he'd vaguely practiced in the shower that morning. Dorian stammered badly, his confidence cracking visibly. Yes, well, we decided to pivot at the last minute based on new data. Eldrick leaned forward in his chair, his eyes narrowing dangerously. Pivot? You sent me a detailed email Friday afternoon specifically confirming this was a marketing expansion pitch. Now you're standing here talking about cost reduction. Dorian looked at me with pure panic in his eyes. He was silently begging me desperately to save him, to jump in and fix this disaster like I always did. I stayed seated. I didn't say a single word. I just waited patiently, watching him drown. Sabine's eyes were wide with absolute terror. She was realizing that something had gone terribly wrong, but she had no idea what or how. Merritt looked confused, glancing rapidly between Dorian and the screen. Dorian, what's going on? Did you approve this change? Eldrick crossed his arms. Someone better start explaining immediately, or this meeting is over right now. Dorian tried desperately to wing it and recover. Yes, well, cost reduction it's about money, and we want to save money so we can spend that money on marketing initiatives that will drive growth and... He was rambling incoherently. Every sentence contradicted the previous one. Sweat was forming visibly on his forehead and upper lip. Sabine tried to jump in and rescue him from disaster. What Dorian means is that we've integrated both approaches into a comprehensive strategy. She glanced at the slide. It showed a complex logistical algorithm with multiple variables and advanced formulas. She had absolutely no idea what any of it meant. Her voice trailed off into awkward silence. Merritt put his head in his hands. I could see him mentally calculating how badly this was going to damage his reputation with the client. Eldrick looked disgusted. He started gathering his papers. This is completely unprofessional. You're wasting my time with a presentation you clearly haven't prepared. I stood up. My voice was steady and calm. Excuse me, sir. May I explain the pivot? Eldrick stopped packing his briefcase. He looked at me with irritation. And you are? Romilly, sir. I'm the one who prepared this analysis. I clicked to the next slide smoothly. The reason we pivoted is because your Q3 supply chain data suggested a 15% leak in overhead spending. Marketing expansion won't fix that fundamental problem. This will. The slide showed a detailed breakdown of where his company was hemorrhaging money. Color-coded charts, specific cost centers, real numbers pulled directly from their public financial statements. Eldrick stopped frowning. He leaned forward, actually interested now. Go on. I clicked to the next slide. Your current distribution system uses 3 redundant warehouses in locations that don't make sense. By consolidating to 2 strategic locations and implementing automated inventory tracking, you'll cut overhead by $8 million annually. Eldrick nodded slowly. Continue. For the next 45 minutes, I commanded that room completely. I walked through every single slide with confidence and precision. Dorian and Sabine sat there completely useless and silent. They couldn't contribute anything because they didn't know the data. They hadn't done any of the work. I showed them automation opportunities they'd never considered. I presented risk analyses that identified problems before they happened. I gave them a complete roadmap with realistic timelines and measurable outcomes. I showed them how their current procurement process was costing them millions in unnecessary middlemen. I presented case studies from similar companies that had implemented my recommended changes. I answered every technical question Eldrick threw at me with detailed, confident responses. Dorian tried to interject once. Yes, and as team leader, I want to add that we. Did you prepare this analysis? Eldrick interrupted sharply, looking at him with suspicion. Dorian hesitated. Well, as a team, we all contributed to. Did you personally prepare this? Eldrick repeated more firmly. Dorian went completely silent, his face red. I clicked to the final slide. It appeared on the screen in large, clear text. Strategic audit prepared solely by Romilly. No other names, just mine, alone. Merritt saw it. His eyes went wide with shock. Eldrick saw it. He nodded with understanding and approval. Eldrick stood up and walked directly to me. He shook my hand firmly. This is honestly the best operational audit I've seen in 10 years. Merritt, why have you been hiding her in the background? Merritt stammered. She usually handles research while Dorian leads the client-facing work and presentations. Well, that's clearly been a massive mistake, Eldrick said. He looked at me directly. I want you leading the implementation, not him. He pointed at Dorian, without even looking at him. The meeting ended. Eldrick left satisfied, already talking enthusiastically about contract signatures and implementation timelines. The second the heavy conference room door closed behind him, Dorian absolutely exploded. You backstabbing snake, he shouted, his face red with rage. You deliberately humiliated us in front of the client. I calmly packed my laptop into my bag. I presented the work that was actually done. You didn't do any work, Dorian. We were supposed to be a team, Sabine screeched, pointing her finger at me accusingly. You went behind our backs. I turned to face them both directly. Teams show up, Sabine. You were drinking margaritas at a bar while I was working. Dorian's face went pale. How did you? You were stalking us. You posted it publicly on Instagram, I said simply. The entire internet could see it. Sucker-free, remember. Sabine looked sick. Dorian's hands were shaking with anger. I walked toward the door. Excuse me, I have actual work to do. Dorian stepped in front of me, blocking my path. This isn't over, Romilly. You just made a huge mistake. I looked him in the eye. Move. He didn't. Dorian rushed to Merritt's office before I could get there. I watched him through the glass walls, gesturing wildly and talking incredibly fast. He was spinning his version of events, getting his lies in first before I could tell the truth. When Merritt finally called me into his office an hour later, I knew Dorian had poisoned the well. Romilly, Merritt said, looking genuinely uncomfortable. Dorian says you locked them out of the server over the weekend, that you went rogue and completely changed the presentation without any team approval. So that was the story they'd decided on. Is that what he said? He says they had a completely different deck ready, but you sabotaged the shared drive. You wanted all the glory for yourself. Sabine nodded enthusiastically from her seat in the corner. She locked us out. We tried to access the files Sunday night and couldn't. She changed all the passwords. It was an impressive lie. They'd coordinated their story perfectly. Merritt looked at me with disappointment. Teamwork is a core value here, Romilly. I can't have people going rogue, even if the presentation went well. So what happens now? I asked calmly. I'm placing you on administrative leave, while HR investigates the IT logs and interviews everyone on the team. Administrative leave. It was a gut punch. I'd saved the account, and now I was being punished because the golden boy had lied to protect himself. I stood up slowly. You're suspending me for doing all the work. I'm suspending you for not following team protocols, Merritt corrected firmly. Until we can verify what actually happened, you're off the project completely. Dorian was standing outside Merritt's office with his arms crossed, a satisfied smirk on his face. He thought he'd won. He thought he'd gotten away with it. I handed my security badge to Merritt. Check the logs carefully. Check the timestamps. Check everything. Merritt nodded. We will. HR is very thorough. I walked past Dorian without looking at him. As I headed to my desk to collect my personal items, I allowed myself a small smile. They had no idea what was coming. I'd made a friend in IT months ago. His name was Bram, and he was brilliant, detail-oriented, and he absolutely hated people who took credit for other people's work. I'd already texted him. They're going to check the logs, make sure they see everything. He'd responded immediately. Already pulled the metadata. They're going to regret this. I went home and spent the afternoon reading peacefully on my couch. I wasn't worried at all. Every lie Dorian and Sabine had told would fall apart the moment someone actually looked at the evidence. My phone rang. It was Bram from IT. They just submitted the formal request for the server logs, he said, sounding amused. Merritt wants to see who accessed what files and when. And what will he see? I asked. The truth, Bram said. Every login, every edit, every timestamp. I'm also including the IP addresses. Did you know Dorian logged in briefly Sunday night from a resort Wi-Fi network called Blue Lagoon Beach Resort? I laughed. He tried to cover his tracks. Barely. He opened the shared drive for 30 seconds, probably panicked when he saw the corrupted file, and logged out. Meanwhile, your activity shows 72 straight hours of work from your home IP address. What about Sabine? She didn't log in once after Friday at 2 p.m., not even to check on progress. I smiled. When does HR get the report? Tomorrow morning. They're going to have some interesting questions for your teammates. While I was at home, Merritt apparently called Dorian into his office. According to an email Bram forwarded me, Merritt had said, You claim you had a marketing deck prepared. I need to see it. We have to keep everything on file for the investigation. Dorian had no deck. He'd never written one. Now he had to create an entire presentation from scratch and pretend he'd made it before the weekend. He and Sabine stayed at the office until 3 a.m, desperately trying to build a marketing expansion deck that they could backdate to Friday. Bram watched their login times and file creation timestamps. They're using stock photos from free websites, he told me. The formatting is terrible. It looks like a high school project. Can they backdate the file properties? I asked. They're trying, Bram said, but the server keeps a shadow log they don't know about. Every file shows its true creation time, regardless of what the properties say. Their Friday deck was actually created Monday at 11 p.m. It was almost sad how badly they were failing. Almost. Wednesday morning, I was still at home on administrative leave. I was catching up on sleep and reading a novel I'd been meaning to finish for months. My phone rang. Unknown number. Romilly. The voice was familiar. It was Eldrick, the client. Yes, sir. Where are you? I sent your office a technical question about the logistics model from slide 17. Some assistant named Sabine called me back and couldn't answer a single question. She tried to transfer me to Dorian, and he was somehow worse. "I'm on administrative leave, sir," I said honestly. "There's an internal investigation happening." "Investigation? For what?" "My team claims I locked them out of the project and went rogue." There was a long pause. Then Eldrick laughed, sharp and angry. "Your boss is playing games. I don't trust Dorian. He couldn't explain his way out of a paper bag. If you're not leading this implementation, I'm pulling the contract." "Sir, I don't think." "I mean it," Eldrick said firmly. "I'm calling Merritt right now. You'll be back in that office by tomorrow, or my lawyers will be canceling everything." He hung up. Thursday morning, I got a call from HR. "Romilly, we need you to come in for a formal meeting. 10 am sharp. Please bring any documentation you have." I arrived exactly on time. The conference room was crowded. Myria from HR sat at the head of the table with a thick folder. Merritt sat to her right, looking uncomfortable. Dorian and Sabine sat across from me, looking smug and confident. They thought their fake deck would save them. They thought their coordinated lies would work. Myria opened the meeting. "We've completed our review of the server logs and file access records." Dorian smiled. "Good. I'm glad we can finally clear up this misunderstanding." Myria looked at him. "Dorian, you claimed you were working all weekend and that Romilly locked you out. Is that correct?" "Yes," Dorian said confidently. "She changed the passwords." "Interesting," Myria said. She projected the server logs onto the screen. "Because according to these records, your last login was Friday at 2 p.m. You didn't attempt to access the shared drive again until Sunday at 11:45 p.m., and that login came from an IP address registered to Blue Lagoon Beach Resort." Dorian's face went completely white. That must be a glitch in the system," Dorian stammered, his confidence evaporating instantly. Sabine jumped in desperately. "Maybe someone hacked his account." Myria clicked to the next screen. "We also have your corporate credit card records. You charged a hotel room Friday night at Blue Lagoon. And Sabine, you were on the same reservation." The room went completely silent. I pulled out my phone. "I also have the voicemail you left me Friday evening, Dorian. The one where you said, and I quote, 'Just polish it up, we trust you.'" I played it. His dismissive, arrogant voice filled the room. "You're a rock star. Just polish the intro and we'll present together Monday." Myria took notes. "That doesn't sound like someone planning to work all weekend. That sounds like someone abandoning their responsibilities." Dorian tried one more time. "We had a separate marketing deck prepared. We can show you." "The deck created Monday at 11 p.m., Myria interrupted. "Yes, we saw that. The metadata shows its true creation date." Sabine started crying. Merritt looked sick. He defended them, believed them, and now he was watching his favorite employees get exposed as liars and frauds. Myria closed her folder. "Dorian, Sabine, you lied to management about your work contributions. You abandoned a critical project. And you filed a false complaint against a colleague to cover your negligence." Dorian tried to speak. Myria held up her hand. "I'm recommending immediate disciplinary action." I looked directly at Merritt. "Eldrick called me yesterday. He said if I'm not leading the implementation, he's pulling the $20 million contract. Today." Merritt's face went pale. "He said that." He doesn't trust Dorian. He couldn't answer basic questions about the proposal because he didn't write it. Sabine was openly crying now. Dorian looked defeated, slumped in his chair. I stood up. "I want the director position, and I want a new team. I won't work with people who lie and take credit for work they didn't do." Merritt looked at Dorian, the golden boy who'd charmed his way through 3 years of promotions. All he saw now was a liability who'd nearly cost him a massive account. Merritt took a deep breath. "What you're asking for is significant, Romilly." "So is a $20 million contract," I said calmly. "Eldrick wants me leading this. You can promote me, or you can explain to the executive board why you lost the biggest account of the year." Merritt was weak, but he loved money and job security more than he loved Dorian. He turned to Dorian and Sabine. I'm reassigning both of you to the archive department effective immediately. Entry-level data processing. That's basically the mailroom, Dorian protested. That's where people who don't do their work belong, Merritt said coldly. Sabine sobbed louder. This isn't fair. Fair, I said quietly. I worked 72 hours straight while you drank margaritas. Don't talk to me about fair. Myria stood up. Dorian, Sabine, collect your personal items from your desks. You'll start your new positions Monday. They left the conference room silently, defeated and humiliated. Merritt looked at me. The director office is yours. I'll have the paperwork ready by end of day. 1 week later, Monday morning, I sat in my new office, the corner one with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the entire city. The director nameplate on my door was freshly installed and gleaming. I'd spent the week assembling a new team carefully. People who actually worked. People who valued honesty and collaboration. People who showed up when they promised. My door was open. I saw Dorian and Sabine walking past in the hallway, carrying heavy boxes of paper files toward the basement. Archive work was manual, tedious, and mindless. They looked miserable. They didn't dare look at me. My phone rang. It was Eldrick. Romilly, we've reviewed the implementation timeline. We're ready to start the first phase. Excellent, I said. I'll have the initial reports to you by Wednesday. I'm glad Merritt finally saw sense, Eldrick said. You should have been leading projects all along. We discussed details for a few more minutes. When I hung up, I felt something I hadn't felt in 3 years. Pride. Real, earned pride. I opened my laptop. My screensaver was a picture of a margarita glass. I'd set it as a reminder that I'd finally stopped being the sucker. I took a sip of my coffee and got to work.